ready to go.
Ready to go now. Another week, another going nowhere for us. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to talk about this week. I've been reading about a few different things, but I wanted to hear your topics first. If you had anything you wanted
I
to
don't know. I've just got. So I'm doing an essay currently, and based on the Gospel of Luke and how it differs from other Gospels. So I'm just like completely in that headspace. And initially I wasn't inclined to go for that question because you can pick from like 9 different questions, but that question, like I don't know, something grabbed me about it, and it's actually been really interesting.
So was that question given to you by the?
Yeah, they give you like say 9 questions and you pick one.
Oh, that's quite good.
Yeah, look at what are the narrative differences in that gospel compared to the others, because we're very much inclined, well, certainly as Christians would tend to read the gospels and just see them as all one book, because they're in one book, but they are an anthology.
But I know that they're very different from each other. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have different emphases. But it doesn't mean they can't harmonise quite a lot, but or it's not good to harmonise them. But it's also useful to read them separately, because then you can sort of ask, what does this author, what is he trying to portray? And once you know what they're trying to focus on or emphasize, then you can you pick up other things what they're saying that are drawing on that emphasis. So you sort of start noticing a lot more different stuff, because you're realizing, oh, this guy Luke, he's very keen on maybe social justice or the spirit, or using Jesus as a role model, whereas the other Gospels would maybe emphasize other stuff.
So what key things did you find compared to the other Gospels?
Well, Luke is very, like a lot of the Gospels, I guess you could class under the term bios, which is some scholar a while ago has came up with this theory, which has been quite widely accepted, but most of the Gospels, or all of the Gospels, are bios, or they're ancient biographies. So they're in that category, not modern biographies, they're ancient biographies. So a biography of a person, and maybe using that biography as has some moral lessons for us to learn as well. So Plutarch is an example of someone, and he wrote about the same time as the writer of the Gospel of Luke. He's Luke is perhaps even more so writing a bios. He's writing very much a bios, and the hero of the bios and the person that it's about is Jesus. But you got all the other characters as well, and you got the birth narrative more prominently in Luke. We think that the birth must be in everyone. Matthew's got a birth account, but it's quite different to Luke. But Luke's the one that probably most people are most familiar with, whereas the other two don't have a real birth account.
Quite relevant in these days with Christmas and everything.
Exactly, yeah.
So, do you think Luke thought as highly of the birth of Jesus as the others, or is there any difference?
Well, in a way, he maybe thought more highly of it because he included it. And if he hadn't included it, the reverence of the Virgin Mary, who in some cultures, Christian cultures, is arguably on par with Jesus, she would not have been, there wouldn't have been the source material to give, to back up that reverence of the Virgin Mary, because in Matthew's Gospel, you saw the virgin birth, but Mary is less emphasized. You don't have the Song of Mary, her Magnificat, which I think might have been an older hymn, which the author incorporated and said, let's put this hymn in. As the birth narrative is very special about Luke in comparison to the other Gospels.
What do you think about the whole, Virgin Mary's, how to put it?
Was she, wasn't she?
Effectively saying that Jesus did not have a father, and he was, sprung forth by parthenogenesis, as they say.
Yeah, I don't know. I think obviously we can't go back with a smartphone and take a picture or video and prove that the conception, how it happened, but we can there definitely is a symbolic value which that story is trying to impart. Which so the event might have happened, but that event in history might reflect a timeless symbolic truth, which is quite evident if you're reading Luke, for instance. Mary represents all of us, and the church the church means basically all people, even though it's at the moment it's just Christians. But the term church effectively means all people, and giving birth to Christ within us, which is the idea of being reborn in Christianity, which all sects emphasize to some extent. So that the virgin birth is, and some accounts have Mary being having conceived the child through her ear. So it's the word, the word of Christ. That the idea is, and in John's Gospel, Christ is equated with the word, and so it's the idea if you hear the word, which is, I guess, you could say the scripture, or what Jesus is trying to get at, what's the core of his teaching, then that conceives something in you and allows Christ to be born within you. That's the idea, and so that's the virgin birth. It's a sort of the word flourishing something within all of us, and the most popular church name is the St. Mary's by quite a significant mark. So we are all St. Mary.
I like that as you said, that this kind of is a symbolism of sparking the faith in each person, and creating that enlightenment maybe inside each person in a way.
Yeah, I guess you could call it some sort of enlightenment, because Jesus is equated with the light, the logos, which is the Greek for word, love, life, the four L's, which are all very related, and they're all actually very relational terms. So they don't point to something specific like other words. They're almost the words that underlie all words. They're, just as everything we see is from light, I think they're trying to get us to come into contact with some more relationality, but it's confusing to think that way, because we're so raised on a world of things and separation, you, me, and this, that.
Oh, that brings me now back to Alan Watts now, the way you described that, because I've only just started one of the series of lectures, Out of Your Mind, after your suggestion,
yes.
Which I'm very glad for. And I've been quite blown away. I think you kind of sold it to me as some kind of light reading, but it wasn't.
Well, light and deep at the same time. It's enjoyable to listen to anyway, but it is deep, I guess.
It's very enjoyable and very easy on the ear, but there's a lot of deep meanings and understandings to kind of get your head around. Especially at the start, he talks about the models of the world, as he called them, and he talks about the ceramic model, which is how we view the world, like schools of thought, let's say, and of how we perceive the world. And talking about the ceramic model, talks about the model of a creator having created everything, like God, who's the creator.
So why is it called ceramic?
Because it's effectively how someone who is creating a ceramic pot, effectively, like a sculptor.
A clear creator and someone sculpting something outside of them.
Exactly, a clear distinction between a creator and the created. And we are created out of an omnipotent creator, and we should be thankful for him, thankful for being created and being here, and we should feel, that we're in the creator's debt one way or another. And the other school of thought is the more scientific school of thought of the automatic model, where the universe has operated and keeps operating as a model of laws, and these laws are fixed and they interact with each other, and we're just a byproduct of all this kind of evolution of chaos that has brought forth everything effectively. And we don't have any kind of agency in that. We're just like a fluke in a way. And he doesn't subscribe to any of these two models in the end. He talks about the dramatic model of the world,
Well, it's a play.
We're almost like a play, yeah, and we are a byproduct of this world as much as we are a part of it. We are connected with everything else. We are like he tries to talk about comparing Big Bang to when you throw a pot of ink against the wall, let's say, and the Big Bang is like that explosion of ink, and in the edges of the wall you'll have this small little splatters, and which are very complex in their patterns and everything else. And he says we're down there, but we're just the byproduct of the whole as much as we've come from it. So I thought that was very interesting because she talks about how we've been taught effectively by society and religion sometimes to feel very separate to everything else around us. But he's trying to say, I think, in many different words and in a lot of different ways, that we are all part of this universe. We're not separated by it, but we're coming out of it and part of it.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to kind of.
Yeah, I think you've done a good job of fleshing it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think some people perhaps don't like the idea of not having a creator because it seems to entail the idea that there's no purpose, and that we as individuals like to have an individual purpose, a feeling that we are special, and that's probably because of lots of well, I guess it's good in a way, but also it can cause a lot of suffering as well. And feeling like we need to make something of our lives, and we've got one life, and I'm not fulfilling my dreams. Things are not happening as quickly as I want to. That's not to say that there is no purpose in that sense, but yeah, I wonder if you can find purpose in the other models, so the play model. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's also a downside looking at the universe as just play. There's also it can open your mind to new possibilities, but I don't know if it's a very hippie way of looking at things, which might well have merit and probably is good for our Western minds to open up a bit. But yeah, I'm not sure if it's just a complete free for all, just play, no stress. Maybe. I remember.
I think he was trying to say that no stress in a way of we're all part of something bigger than us in a way. I think that's how I saw it in a way.
Yeah, it's probably best reflected in the myth from.
And I think he wanted to say that a lot more are connecting us than separating us, and I think that's what he was trying to kind of.
Well, I think meaning needs connection, so we want purpose. Purpose is meaning, and meaning means connection in some way. It needs to have meaning. Basically, you need you, and you need to have something valuable outside of you, which you can have some effect on to help to want it to continue or flourish, independent of whether you exist or not. So, yeah, I guess in a way you need that connection. You need to actually be able to see that connection, and to have. You can't have meaning if you think that you're the only person who's got any value, because you're ultimately going to.
And I think that's why people don't feel there's any meaning these days, because we've been taught systematically to think very individualistically and very, isolated from one another these days, in a way. And I think has caused a lot of lack of meaning for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a question of whether that's come out of the scientific revolution or whether you can put the blame a bit further back in terms of Protestantism or Christianity generally. So the whole idea of the ceramic universe is because that influenced the view of science, and how we need to look back in time and find what was the reason that we were created. And it's very much looking at individuals and individual purposes, individual things. What do they do? So, yeah, it's interesting to look at what's caused that. And I know it's only just flourished, I guess, now, but perhaps it's always been a problem.
It is a lot. There was so much to unpack there with Alan Watts. This is just me scratching the surface there with with this account of, this is only, I think, lecture 1 or lecture 2, the first couple of lectures where he talked about this topic, and I'm keen to listen to more about it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, he's an interesting guy. Like he didn't live particularly long, and he also had a lot of problems with alcoholism, which sort of makes some people doubt whether he really got it. And there's some interesting stories of Ram Dass, who's another spiritual guy, around the same time meeting him, and Alan Watts is just trying to make this tea for the Zen tea ceremony, and he's shaking shaking the spoon, so it's supposed to be very calm, but he's just, I guess, withdrawal effects from alcohol and maybe drugs, it just can't hold it together. Which is why I said earlier, maybe, that just complete letting go and complete play is perhaps, you have to perhaps be careful about that, because you can see letting go as two ways. You can see letting go of limitations, and therefore you can just go and do what you want. But a lot of the spiritual teachings also emphasize the importance of not just doing what you want, because that also is ego driven, and ultimately, like from our past experience, we tend to see that usually pursuing what we want, our appetites, to excess, actually ends up hurting us, even though we can't see it in the moment sometimes. Nearly always that's the case, that throughout life you'll work out, actually, even just something so small as eating loads of chocolate at Christmas, as both of us have probably done, and you sort of realise, oh yeah, why did I do that? It's like maybe it's kind of good for like maybe a minute, but then like then you got your body's probably under functioning for quite a long time after that. So I guess it's a detachment on two levels rather than just one. It's a detachment from the fears everyone or a lot of people have, and then also detachment from the appetites and being led by that, and actually being able to see in the moment whether this is going to be good for me or not, which is easier said than done. I think if you can, because otherwise you can't really play, I guess, because if you're like driven towards your next bit of higher pleasure, you're always driven towards it, and so you're not in a playful mindset. It's more of a maybe dopamine rather than serotonin. So to put it in some sort of neuroscience terms, which I don't really understand, but you probably have a better understanding of that. But like it more, I'm trying to say like more of, if you're a dopamine, you're just driven towards something, and then you get another burst of dopamine when you get it, and then it's like a sugar high. You get a sugar high for a tiny little bit of time, then it plummets, and then you're worse than you were before, and you're wanting something else. So you're just on a roller coaster
of dopamine.
Where you're never actually really happy or able to play and let go, because you're following your desires, but not in a way which is healthy.
Well, these days we have so many things, I think, hijacking our dopamine circuits.
And when we let one thing hijack us, then that tires out our body or mind and makes us more susceptible to other things hijacking us. So in the past, we didn't have to be as disciplined, because
there weren't as many temptations, I think. I mean temptations. I mean in terms of like dopamine temptations. I think these days everything is designed to tap into your little dopamine receptors and give them a little spike from your algorithm, scrolling from one video to another, to things like betting and gambling and betting on sports events.
We got everything really. You got like what people 30, 50 years ago would have thought of as heaven in some ways, sort of just every sort of luxury we could imagine. It's on our doorstep, and you can order all sorts of nice foods to our door. But actually it doesn't make us any happier. And it's whether like, is discipline the right way to deal with it, or is discipline got problems with it as well, and does it need to be some sort of awareness?
I think discipline can help you to sometimes reset those dopamine circuits in a way, bring them back to baseline in a way.
Do you think that you do fasting once a week? Do you think that helps? And do you think it helps with just food, or do you think it helps generally?
I do think that it helps in some ways and it doesn't help in others, because you can say that when you fast yourself, then some people would fast and then eat double the next time after they fasted.
Yeah,
so the whole point isn't to just fast, is to just allow yourself to just bring back your cravings and your appetite, let's say, back to a more baseline function, and then go back to slowly back eating again without eating like a huge meal to compensate for the fact you didn't eat before.
Yeah. So I notice when I first eat, and whether that's like 10 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it's sort of after that, then I start wanting to eat more. So I might have one meal, and I haven't needed it up to that point, but I've had it whenever it is in the day. And then as soon as I do that, then a few hours later, I'll want another meal. And it seems like that sort of sets your blood sugar up to keep you wanting meals until you sleep, and then you sort of reset
it, go back again, and do the same thing. It's tricky. I just think, in some way, discipline can help you reset yourself sometimes, but it's just as important when you go back to doing things you did to kind of not go back to the same cycles, the same negative spirals, let's say, of overeating or whatever you're doing that you're doing in excess, let's say.
Yeah,
I guess it's so much easier to kind of fall into that routine again.
Yeah, I think also an awareness of the negative cycle and what's causing it can just in itself help you sort of stop, because then you can help it go into a positive cycle, because every point on a negative spiral, what's causing that will also be, if you don't do it, will naturally prompt a positive cycle.
That's true, but then it's very hard to kind of break out, I think, of patterns that our brain is used to.
Especially when we're tired, we sort of slip back into, I guess, neuroplasticity. We just go back into the deepest rut of what's most common, what's been the circuit most run in the past. So,
exactly. You do the thing that is the most comfortable, the thing that you're used to, and you can do in autopilot, which is all the habits you want to avoid doing most of the times.
Yeah, and it's so nice sometimes just to think, I just can let myself go and just go into those circuits, because it's so effortless in a way. So yeah, it's interesting. Like, as lots of spirituality talks about letting go, but it's not about just letting go in that sense. Maybe,
but I think not letting go to indulge your desires.
Yes.
I think letting go in terms of other things, the things that torment you. Let go of these.
It's like as Meister Eckhart, who's a Christian mystic, who's actually got a lot of similarities with a lot of Eastern spirituality. It's probably the Christian most similar to the Eastern spirituality before there was actually links between the two. So he says the primary virtue is detachment, and that's the letting go of mortal fears and craving and desires. And God almost is not defined as a thing to reach out for, but it's what you sink back into when you let go of those desires. And so it's almost, like devotion to God is almost like anti-devotion to everything else. But that's not to say you hate it or that you're disconnected. It's actually
that you can distance yourself from it.
Yeah, well, that realization that trying to hold on to the ever-changing world is not going to help you, that actually allows you to connect to it, because rather than really being focused towards something and ignoring all the nice little things on the way, then you're able to relax and enjoy the change of life. I think Master Eckhart William Blake said something like, the person who tries to grab hold of bliss is unhappy, cursed, but the person who is able to let the bliss go is blessed.
I think a lot of people believe that bliss isn't something you can grab and find. It's something that you acquire, maybe.
I think it was Thoreau, and one of those people like Thoreau said that the bliss or joy or peace is something which, like a butterfly, it just sometimes lands on you if you're just relaxed.
Exactly, it kind of comes to you, and it doesn't, because it's the more you try and reach for it, the more you become unhappy in a way and not satisfied.
Yeah, and as soon as you look for a butterfly, look for the sunset and think, "Am I happy?
Yeah.
Am I happy?" And then you try to catch it, and then it's gone as soon as it's there. And you're like, is it ever the analytical mind can never catch it?
I think it's because it involves an element of feeling content, and unless you feel content, you cannot feel truly happy in a way.
Yeah.
Because you always seek something else, which makes you.
Yeah, it seems like peace is like the predecessor for all happiness, which I guess is going back to what we said just a few minutes ago of God being like the absence. Like maybe God is something more, but also he's like, or she is with peace that is in the absence of all the seeking, which is, yeah, I don't know what we were just saying before that.
About happiness.
Yeah, so we were saying that. So you need to have contentment before.
Yeah.
So that could be mapped onto the Christian worldview of you need to put God first, put first the kingdom of God, and then all will be given to you. So it's the idea of put first peace and then joy comes. Not if you seek joy first as a way to get joy or peace, then you're not going to get it.
But do you think that you necessarily need God for that? Couldn't you say that you just...
I guess you could say God is a metaphor.
That's what I'm trying to get to, because people would hear God and they'll think about, they're talking about, the Christian God or the Islam God or...
Well, that's why nearly all these theologies, actually, if you really look into them, they're saying that God is undefinable. And God is the name above all names. It's basically a name, which is a symbol towards something which is
spiritual.
It's more like the absence. It's for, but in the absence there's some sort of richness there, which without which we can't really live. Which is the whole point. They're talking about Jesus as the life. Is without living in that way, we don't really have a life. Even though he died early, he was able to truly live, which is something which we struggle with.
Yeah, the reason I talked about the term of God is because a lot of people hear God and they immediately shut down very often. They don't like hearing, especially people that don't believe in religion as such, that they're not religious. They don't want to hear, you need to be closer to God in a way.
Yeah, I know.
This is why I'm saying
it's something which
if we can say it in a different way, that's rather than saying God, if we can say being closer to the immaterial, I don't know, maybe.
Immaterial?
Yeah.
Well, maybe. But you might also say it's like, what is the immaterial? Maybe it's more... It's just you're disconnecting from the fakeness of your thoughts, which are imaginations by definition. They're thoughts, they're not in reality. So if you can disconnect from them, then you sink back into reality. And that's not saying it's a spiritual reality. It's just reality, and reality is pretty cool. So it's not like necessarily saying God is on some higher level, which I'm not saying that's also not true, but it's like something which I can't verify. So yeah, I think at a base level, religion it can help you to live in that way of it can, in a way, when you're low, it can be hard to just say, live immaterially or let go of stuff. Sometimes you need it's stronger to love God or love the absence, but you might say it's a metaphor. I don't know, but it's easier to grasp on something, and maybe there's hazard also in trying to grasp something. But it's easier to stay loyal to one thing, God, rather than to stay loyal to detachment.
I see what you mean.
And so it is a problem of whether your spirituality is of your heart or your head, because logically you might say that's obviously not, like maybe God is not, well, I can't see God, so, but yeah, like it depends whether you want to have your spirituality completely logical and or not, or whether you want it to work in those moments when you're in despair. But it's maybe you could make an argument that it's better just to stick loyal to detachment.
Okay, interesting. I don't have any follow-up on that. I'm not certain myself on God and...
I don't think we're supposed to be certain on God.
No, yeah, I know, but I mean, I'm still very skeptic on anything that isn't,
I think agnostic is a Greek term
yeah,
for not knowing.
not knowing. Yes,
And I think that, if I'm correct, in the Orthodox Greek Church, that's actually not considered like in the West, agnostic's almost seen as synonymous with atheist in a way, like not quite, but in the East, I believe it's almost it's a virtue, or it's positive. It's seen by Christians as a positive because it's the ability, you're basically admitting you don't know God, you can't know God intellectually.
in a way, yes. When you use it just with the etymology of the word, then yes, it is accepted in a way, but you're also expected to follow the Christian Orthodox Church as much as possible.
Which I think they also use the word agnostic something or whatever the Greek ending is, but for like for their like if you look at how they pray, I think you'll find that I might be wrong on this, but they use the term agnostic. What's the Greek ending?
Well, we say we just it's different to say it in Greek,
Okay,
obviously,
well,
but
we don't need to get in any
you do say for someone being agnostic, or agnosticism. I don't know if that's the word.
Okay. Well, there's not like a verb, or no. There's just what? Yeah, agnostic. Okay, yeah. Let's just go with agnostic. I believe I'm correct in saying that if like it's actually like considered for a prayer, you need to go through a state of agnosticism, a state of not knowing God, in order to really start to know God.
Yeah, there is the school of thought for sure. For sure, a lot of people believe that you have to start somewhere and then, try and become more connected to God in a way. But there's a lot of traditions that, are demanded by the church for you to go to the church very often, to do Lent, to do everything else that a lot of people don't want to do these days at all. They don't want to be told when to eat, what to eat, when to go to church, when not go to church, when to pray. They want to do it as they feel it,
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you could say there's two schools of thought on that. In a way, it's good for our individualities to not have stuff that we're in control of, but also you could. And I've been reading a really interesting book recently called "The Secret History of Christianity" by Mark Vernon, and he makes a very compelling case, I think, that Jesus was trying to awake interior. He basically he came across all these practices that the Jews were practicing, and were basically saying it's not about how it looks outside; it's about internalizing that. So, and he uses parables to show that it's not about what you do exteriorly or towards others that matters. It's more you need to change yourself into interior. You need to change your interior self, and then right action will flow from that. So, like, considering yourself virtuous or fasting in front of other people, or saying I'm fasting, or just doing a religious ritual because it's the right thing to do, and you don't actually understand the significance behind it. They're all things that Jesus was in his parables was basically saying, no, look at why we're doing this. What's the deeper thing behind it?
That's a lot of the issues that probably have as well with religion these days. There's so much virtue signaling of people saying, "Oh, I'm fasting. Oh, I'm doing this. Oh, I'm going to church." But in practice, there's such bad people. But they just say, "Oh, I'm doing all this. I'm such a good Christian. I go to church every Sunday." But then in every aspect of their lives, they're evil people, treating people badly.
Which well, Jesus was all about the golden rule of which underlies all rules, and the two commandments which underlie the Ten Commandments. So in a way, he didn't do away with rules, but he saw what the spirit behind the law was, and he was asking people to come into contact with that spirit directly, rather than before. Perhaps it had been more of a just way of keeping society together. Religion had been more of a way to make a harmonious society. But his idea was actually, we can change our awareness, and therefore then we can act in a way which is conducive to society's flourishing.
Well, you could definitely say that religion has been instrumental, at least for the development of the Western society, because it did help maintain the social cohesion over the different centuries in a lot of ways. Fostering community growth and development, but it's a lot to kind of keep up with if you live in a modern world that you feel very detached from that in a way.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about what this modern world is doing to us, and is there any positive? Is it a natural step in evolution? So going back to the ceramic universe, where everything has a purpose, and Aristotle said that final cause, things have, each of us or each thing has a final cause, a purpose where it's made for. So in the making, that entails an ends goal. So when we make a clock, that needs to reach its end goal of being telling the time or helping people tell the time for it to fulfill its purpose of being a clock. So
I definitely think each model has its pros and cons. As you said, having a defined purpose for you because you were created by a creator, that sounds really nice. Helps you sleep at night.
Yeah.
But at the same time, maybe it feels also like predestination, that everything you do doesn't really matter because you're created that way. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I need to listen to more of what Alan Watts has to say about the different models of the world and our consciousness of it. But I want to talk to you about another topic I was hearing about the other day, which was about the telepathy tapes. And I don't know if you heard about that.
Yeah, you did send me a... Oh yeah, you did send me a video on...
I did send you a video with Joe Rogan talking about it.
So these are, if I understand, people who are... Is it exclusively autistic?
Yes.
And they're able to... There's tests that real scientists have done. Is it like, I don't know, have you looked at the studies? Like, these scientists are able to tell that these autistic people are able to know what the people close to them are thinking.
Yes, effectively, the video that I sent you was Joe Rogan talking about that podcast named the Telepathy Tapes, where this podcaster made this series of episodes talking about people who are, as you said, autistic, and they are in most cases non-verbal autistic children who have displayed the ability to understand what their parents are thinking. Specifically, in many of the cases, at least in the first 2 episodes that I watched, it was they could tell what their mother was thinking. And there's been a lot of discussion about it. And in the first episode, they do a test where they bring the mom and her daughter together in a room, and they start showing a number to the mom through a number generator, random number generator. So it was all randomized. There was cameras everywhere. There was no other way to kind of convey the information. And the daughter would wear a blindfold. And that was tested as well by the crew and everything. And they would show a number to the mom. And then after the mom had seen the number, then they even had something separating them. Then the separation would come down, and the daughter would lift the blindfold and type the numbers herself in an iPad that she used to communicate. And she was accurate every time. Now, they did say that they did that test with numbers, then they did the test with having different colored sticks and then putting them in the correct color pots, let's say, while she was blindfolded as well. And then they acknowledged in the end of that episode that test wouldn't have been valid for a lot of people because the mom would be touching her in the blindfold.
Right. Well, the mum was close enough to touch her.
Yes, the mum was close enough to touch her, and she would touch her on the blindfold.
Right.
And a lot of people believe that there is something called facilitated communication, where someone who has difficulty communicating would be helped to communicate by a member of the family, let's say. And that would usually entails them holding the hand or the shoulder or something like that. But there's been studies apparently that have showed that when someone is holding another person, especially a person who is considered disabled in this case, they effectively facilitate the message themselves. It's effectively, if I was helping you write, but I was holding your arm in such a way that I was effectively creating like the movement for you slightly.
Right.
So guiding you on how to write. So
a bit like a seance.
Yes, like the Ouija board effect, exactly that. So they say that in a lot of these cases, individuals that are being touched by their carers, they're effectively being prompted by them on what to write and what to say and what to do. So it effectively works the same way. They don't read your mind. They could do it just because you're doing it for them, effectively. Yeah. Even if you're doing it subconsciously, you don't understand it.
That's still like impressive.
But that would still be impressive. The person who was doing the podcast said she couldn't see any way how her mother could transmit the information just by holding her just by having the hand on top of the blindfold. It's just and then the second episode was even more impressive because then they found someone else, another mom with her son in this case, where they were in different rooms. They did a similar test. And
so no cheating in that one.
There was you couldn't argue cheating. You couldn't argue the cheating because people were arguing on some of the comments underneath. They would say, "Why did in that test, the first test that I told you about, why did the screen come down between them?" They were sitting in a sofa like that, how we're sitting now, and they would show her the number, and then they would lower the screen, and she would see her daughter. After the daughter pulled the blindfold off, and then the daughter would write the number. If it was true telepathy, people would say, why do you need to lower the screen between them?
I guess maybe it's just a extra safety proof or just something, I don't know.
But in the second episode, they're in different rooms and they're doing that, and it gets like crazier like that because then how are they doing it? But in my view, I'm very, very skeptical about this kind of stuff. I'm very... it's almost the same thing as because you cannot see someone who is a magician doing a card trick, because you cannot see the secret there, that doesn't mean it's true magic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, in a way, there is no magic because even like things which are unexplainable, if they are proved to happen, then there will be some scientific reason, presumably, they happen.
You say scientific reason, I just say I cannot. There's a million ways where you can sleight of hand things. I don't know if that was some kind of sleight of hand type of thing happening there, especially from a podcast and listening to it. Apparently, there are videos, and you can kind of watch them. You have to buy the videos, so I didn't go and buy the videos. But in one of the videos, one of the thumbnails of the videos, which was the test with the mother and the girl, the first test, the mother not only had one finger on top of the blindfold, she had her whole hand on top of the blindfold.
Yeah.
So, that to me could suggest some element of facilitated communication there, or communication by touch.
Yeah, which I think is still pretty interesting.
And a lot of people,
I just want to see whether there's been lots of really good studies on this or not. And
apparently, there was a scientist who was working, an actual scientist who was an academic, who is working with these people and their families, and she's been trying for ages to kind of be heard and provide evidence to the scientific community about this being an actual real phenomenon. But there's a lot of obviously push against this because this is not very
there probably is quite a lot of science which is just looks completely crazy, but you test it every time and it's like perfect test, and it's like somehow it just keeps coming up with results which are crazy, but for some reason we don't seem to want to go there. But I don't know. Like, I think often it's right to be completely skeptical, but there probably is some. I don't know if this is one example, but there probably is examples where there's just something which just seems as completely crazy actually just keeps getting proved. Simple test, guaranteed test every time. You can just test it. You can invite all the scientists from around the world. They come, see the test, and they'll be like, oh yeah, obviously, there's nothing wrong here. But it's just so crazy that it's just the cognitive dissonance means that you can't, they can't like grapple with it, or they just want to bury it somewhere, or not physically, but they just don't want to look at it, because scientists tend to be the personality type which are very much wanting things to make sense, and therefore often a lot of scientists don't really want to go into the quantum physics side of things, because it starts to not make sense in some ways, not in the Einsteinian way, no, the Newtonian way. But yeah, like, I think I'm all for as much skepticism as possible, but I'm also like, if someone showed me all the like some perfect studies and stuff, I'd be like, okay, interesting. I don't know how it works.
If I was shown the studies and I was shown the videos as well, I'd be much more open to it. But the issue I had with hearing the first 2 episodes, there's 10 episodes, was that the author seems to be very convinced of it, let's say. Because
that's the problem with a lot of this stuff. It only gets attraction not in the scientific community, but through media. And if you're going to sell media, you as a host probably have to be very passionate about it, because you are passionate about it, or because you want to sell it.
The host already sounds very convinced and dismisses any kind of, deception that might be at play here, like, very quickly. And I don't think, at least in the first 2 episodes, there hasn't been enough scrutiny of that, because we live in a world where I wouldn't put it past anyone to want to bring attention to themselves by saying, oh, my child is doing these miraculous things by using deception. So I wouldn't put it past people doing that. And I think there hasn't been, at least in the first 2 episodes, not enough scrutiny for me to be fully convinced. It was quite impressive, the second episode especially, where they were doing tests in different rooms. But I would still not be exactly convinced until I saw proper videos of it and seeing.
Yeah, but it's interesting, like, because I'm probably the same boat as you, I'd need more evidence. But I wonder, like, why, because this sort of stuff is objectively fascinating. Like, if it's actually is real.
Oh yeah, I love
if real.
Yeah, I love the idea that it would be real.
Yeah. But why don't, like, because I feel the same, and probably you as well. Like, if that is like truly fascinating, why don't we just put all our effort into trying to figure out whether all our spare time
that's what they're trying
to actually find out? But I don't know why. Because in a way, I feel like, yeah, you should focus on finding out stuff, whether this stuff is really real. Like, whether you're a scientist or not, like, just so you can.
This is what they were hoping.
You can properly dismiss it or not.
This is what they were hoping in the podcast, to create more attention, more funding, more support, to kind of look into these things more and realistically and see if there is more to it and how it's happening. Because it goes even further.
Oh, yeah.
These individuals that have that ability, not only they can communicate with their parents and telepathically hear their thoughts, but apparently there is a whole different dimension they can access called the Hill.
The Hill?
Hill, as Hill.
Right.
The Hill.
Okay. Another dimension.
Almost, it sounded, I haven't gotten there yet.
And it's got a name.
It has a name,
okay.
It's the Hill. And they can meet other people there, other individuals with that ability there. It's almost like a hub.
Right.
It's like a...
So only people who've got that ability?
Yes.
Or are we all there and just most of us don't know?
I don't know.
Anyway,
I haven't gotten there. I haven't gotten to the Hill part yet. But there is more to it, apparently. It's not just mere telepathy.
Well, it reminds me of the stories of people in indigenous South America, or indigenous tribes in South America, who would be able to send messages via their dreams to other people.
Well, almost like astral projection, yes. Like, I would think, or I don't know. I know that this is like a bit crazy, but
I guess it's the idea of, like, if you were to try and come up with some sort of basic, very primitive theory of why it would work, it probably involved something on the quantum physics realm rather than Newtonian physics. So time and space is more just transcendent, it doesn't matter, and it's more of an intentionality, which sounds extremely woo-woo, but yeah, it's interesting. There is like lots of examples of that sort of thing which make you sort of think, but yeah, I
have been very
haven't
fascinated.
been convinced. Yeah,
I have been
it's
very
interesting.
fascinated hearing them, and I would suggest you to also go and listen to them. You can find them on Spotify or YouTube.
Yeah.
And
But yeah, part of me is like really interested. Like I was saying earlier, like why don't I just go and really explore this? If this is just like if we're in a boring world where everything makes sense and then there's just one crazy scientific theory, that's where it's most fun and most interesting to explore. But I'm just sort of not really that bothered whether telepathy exists, to be honest. It's kind of cool.
that would mean but that would mean that there is something beyond our material world then.
Yeah, but maybe all this trying to get beyond, because we don't like now, is so in a way spirituality is not spiritual, because ultimately spirituality is telling us to get real, and a lot of people think of spirituality as going beyond ourselves, but if you look really into most of the spiritual teachings, they are really just trying to tell us to live with ourselves and accept our limitations.
I understand that, but if you could argue the opposite thing as well, that if we don't have access to this side of us, this spiritual side of us, telepathy, everything else that's in it, we're effectively living handicapped by being, crippled into living only in this dimension, into only this existence, which is, confined in our physical body, while there's so much more out there.
Yeah,
and maybe that's what is creating all these issues for everyone in this world. I don't know. I'm just saying. But if all that is true.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either. I just think it's fascinating for the reason that I want to see how much they can convince me that this is real and there's no foul play or deception one way or another. Because to me, you can argue that someone who's a magician who's doing a sleight of hand is doing magic, but it's just a trick. What is the trick, Well, is it a real trick, or is it,
That sort of attitude is quite good, if you know you have a really naturally skeptical mind, but you're also open to exploring, or you've got an open mind as well, which people think they're opposite. Skeptical and open mind might not be the same. But if you've got an open mind, then you can live quite an interesting life, or spend your time exploring interesting stuff, because you're open to the strange, but you're also know that you're very skeptical and that you're not going to get taken in for a ride as easily as maybe some people who aren't so skeptical. So you can sort of trust your skepticism to allow you to go and explore these more out there areas to see what's to them.
Precisely. What I found also fascinating was under this video of Joe Rogan and a lot of other videos, because I checked, just typed in telepathy tapes to see what other videos had been made about it, people talking about the topic. And I saw in a lot of these videos, underneath in the comments, a lot of the people would say that they've had similar experiences. That's what I found fascinating. A lot of people underneath in the comments would say, oh, I have a 10-year-old autistic mute brother, and I've always felt that connection with them. I always felt that I could communicate telepathically with them, or I was autistic, or some people say I'm autistic, and when I was younger I felt like I had that ability where I could listen to my parents' thoughts and so on and so forth. And that's what I found fascinating, that a lot of people seem to identify with these experiences, at least in the comments.
Yeah, which makes you think there must be something to it.
And much less,
maybe not like the actual thing, but there must be something to explain that.
And much less skepticism. I was trying desperately to find comments of people saying, "How? Give me examples of the deception, or give me examples of like the trick they're pulling, or something like that."
Well, I think it's in a way it's intuitive to a lot of us. I think on one level, a very basic level, is that when emotions seem to be viral, we can catch emotions from other people to some degree. And we say that people who are empaths, or people who have high empathy, are perhaps even more open to catching emotions from other people. But we know this. So, like, we can hide our emotions, but sometimes we could go into a group, and people maybe sort of will pick up that you're not feeling that great, or they'll they themselves will start feeling not as great as if you come in with high energy or you were feeling really good, and then therefore you sort of come in as a metaphorical light, and therefore you're able to make everyone else feel light.
I had thought of that. Maybe this ability from the telepathy tapes is maybe an enhanced version of empathy, like a supercharged empathy state where you're so in tune with someone in your life that you're able to understand them without speaking, in that sense of telepathy, let's say. And maybe this is like an ability we all have, or maybe it shuts down in other people. Or, kind of how you're blind, you kind of have a heightened hearing. Maybe in the same way, these children, they don't have the ability to talk, but their other senses, in this case, the telepathy, is supercharged, and they can.
It's interesting, yeah. Do we
hear
have
other people?
The question of do we have other senses than just the 5 senses we think we have? A scientist might say no, because you've got the senses are to convey information from out here to in here, and they map onto a part of the brain which if we didn't have a sense for, I guess I'm trying to map this out. So if for infrared, I guess our brain would not be able to process it.
No, because we don't have the light cones in our eyes to be able to see.
But also, is that just the eyes, or if we did have that in the eyes, would we still need something else in the brain which would also be able to detect?
I think you couldn't, because the brain develops based on the existing input. So an input that hasn't been registered before would be very difficult to map. It's kind of like people that were born blind, that had their vision restored later in life, they still cannot process visual information the same way as other people, because their brain didn't develop to understand the 3D world the way that it was meant to happen while the brain was developing. So children who were blind are effectively still kind of blind, because they see what we see, let's say, but they're not able to kind of understand it. The brain isn't able to read the visual information and translate it to an image. So that would be the case with infrared, for example. You've never seen infrared, so you wouldn't be able to visually understand it, I would think. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I think would happen.
Yeah.
But as you say, maybe I can see what you were going with as a fact of, if it's not mapped in the brain, then how can we know that we're using that ability? Is that kind of what you're...
Yeah, I was sort of saying that where we only got like 5 senses, we think. In a way, we could make the argument that if we were developed on another planet, for instance, that we would have another set of 5 senses, which we might be able to predict, and we might have no idea what they would be. And if there's many different planets, and we grew on each different planet, we'd have different characteristics or different senses. So you could say we've got like 1,000 senses that are potential senses, but we only use 5. And it's just interesting to see whether, like, is our brain, how it is that also developed so that even if we are able to tap into other senses, we wouldn't be able to use them? Or is there something deeper in the brain which is just consciousness, which maybe transcends us and physical limitations, evolution or growth? Is there something that those senses go into, or does it just stop in the brain in like a you could say it's like a machine in the brain, and it just gets to like the vision or whatever, gets to the end point, and then it's done, and it's all like a physical machine? Or you could say it gets to get portrayed in consciousness, which you could argue is maybe something which is unlimited, which maybe you could say is just awareness, and it's not part of that circuit or that stages of the visual process or any sense can send information to that. But the consciousness, it would be the same whether we're on this planet or whether we developed 5 other senses on another planet. It's just whether we could ourselves tap into another sense, or whether we're doomed to the 5 senses we have, and therefore there's no point us trying to tap into our potential telepathy.
That's another great question related to that as well. I hope that they'll give us more answers. I don't know. I'll keep watching those tapes, and I'll keep you updated on that, because I'm definitely extremely fascinated by it. And I think it's about time we wrapped up our episode.
Yeah,
I
bang on the hour.
Bang on
pretty
the
much.
hour. I think we had a good discussion, and I think we can reconvene next week for more discussions on going nowhere and spiritual, metaphysical, and potentially telepathic
Yeah.
topics.
We're going everywhere.
Going everywhere, not only nowhere.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Perfect. Nice one. That was a good time. Did you plan that, or was it just?
I didn't. I just looked